My name is Eleanor, I'm 67 years old. And I never thought I'd say this about my own flesh and blood. After my hip surgery, I needed a cane to walk. What I didn't need was my 3 children using that same cane to beat me when I refused to sign over my home. They left me bruised and locked in my own bedroom, but they never expected what I did next. If you're watching this from somewhere in the world, please like and subscribe to hear how I went from victim to victor, and how my children went from inheritance to debt. Before I tell you about the betrayal that nearly destroyed me, let me take you back to who I was before all this happened. I grew up in Boston with dreams bigger than most women were allowed to have in those days. I graduated top of my class with a business degree when most women were expected to be homemakers. I was determined to make something of myself. That's when I met Richard. He was handsome, ambitious, and unlike other men I dated, he admired my intelligence. We met at a charity fundraiser where we both volunteered. He approached me with a glass of punch and said, "I've been watching you organize this entire event while the committee takes all the credit." That observation told me everything I needed to know about him. We married within a year. Richard had already started his investment firm, and I joined him in building it. Together, we turned a small company into a regional powerhouse. We worked side by side for 15 years before our first child arrived. Amanda came first when I was 32. She was a beautiful baby with Richard's blue eyes and my stubborn chin. Bradley followed 2 years later, serious even as an infant. Stephanie, our surprise blessing, arrived when I was 40. Having children later in life meant we were financially secure, able to give them everything we hadn't had growing up. Our family home was a colonial masterpiece in Brookline, with 6 bedrooms and a garden I tended personally. We hosted Christmas parties where the children would perform little plays they'd written. Summers meant vacations to Martha's Vineyard, where we taught them to sail. I can still see Richard patiently showing Bradley how to tie sailing knots, the sun making his hair gleam gold. Education was paramount in our household. All 3 children attended private schools, then prestigious universities. Amanda became a marketing executive, Bradley followed his father into finance, and Stephanie pursued fashion design. We paid for everything, wanting to give them the foundation to succeed without student debt burdening them. Richard and I planned meticulously for retirement. By the time we reached our 60s, our portfolio was diverse and healthy. The house was fully paid for, and our combined net worth approached $5 million. We looked forward to traveling, spoiling future grandchildren, and growing old together in the home we loved. Then 5 years ago, Richard clutched his chest during our morning walk and collapsed. The doctors called it a massive coronary. Despite their efforts, he was gone within hours. I sat alone in the waiting room, my world shattered when my children arrived. Amanda held me as I cried, Bradley handled the paperwork, and Stephanie made calls to family and friends. In those first terrible days, they seemed like the caring children we had raised. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and sympathetic murmurs. Richard was respected in the community, and hundreds attended. I remember standing between Amanda and Bradley, Stephanie slightly behind us, greeting people whose faces swam before my tear-filled eyes. "Mom's going to stay with me for a while," Amanda announced to relatives at the reception. I was too numb to correct her, but I had no intention of leaving my home. That night, alone in the bed Richard and I had shared for 40 years, I made a promise to him that I would be strong. In the months that followed, I noticed subtle changes in my children's behavior. Amanda began asking about Richard's will during our weekly dinners. Bradley offered repeatedly to simplify my finances by taking control of the accounts. Stephanie called more often, each conversation eventually turning to questions about family heirlooms and jewelry. "Dad would want us to make sure you're taken care of," Bradley said one Sunday, a strange emphasis on taken care of that made me uncomfortable. My health was generally good for my age, though arthritis had begun to make itself known in my knees and hips. I remained independent, managing the household and finances as I always had. The children seemed disappointed when I mentioned traveling to Italy, a trip Richard and I had planned before his death. "Is that safe at your age, Mom?" Amanda questioned, though I was only 62 and perfectly capable. Looking back, I can see the warning signs. The questions about the will, the suggestions I was too old for independence, the subtle inventory of valuable items in my home. But at the time, I dismissed my unease as grief making me paranoid. These were my children, after all. The babies I had nursed, the toddlers whose tears I had dried, the teenagers I had guided through heartbreaks and disappointments. How could I have known what they would become? The real trouble began when I needed hip replacement surgery last year. The pain had become unbearable, making even simple tasks difficult. I scheduled the procedure, arranged for a home health aide for the first 2 weeks of recovery, and prepared my home for convalescence. Everything was meticulously planned. The surgery went well, but recovery would be slow. I returned home with a walker, prescriptions for pain management, and strict instructions for physical therapy. That's when my children swooped in like vultures disguised as caregivers. "Mom, the stairs to your bedroom will be impossible," Amanda said on my first day home. "We've set up the guest room downstairs for you. Just temporarily." Seemed logical, even thoughtful. The guest room was smaller but had an attached bathroom. What I didn't realize was that moving me downstairs was the first step in their plan to take over my home. Bradley arrived the next day with a folder of documents. "I've been thinking about your finances, Mom. While you're recovering, let me handle the bills and investments. You shouldn't worry about money right now." Again, it seemed reasonable. I was on pain medication and tired easily. I allowed him to take some paperwork home, though I insisted he bring me copies of anything he filed or changed. Stephanie visited less frequently than her siblings, but when she did, her attention focused on my possessions rather than my well-being. "This silver service was Grandma's, right?" she asked during one visit, running her fingers over the antique tea set. "I've always loved it. Have you thought about who should have it someday?" Small items began disappearing from my home. First, it was things I might not immediately notice. A crystal paperweight from Richard's desk, a small Waterford vase from the hallway table. When I mentioned the missing items, Amanda suggested I was confused from the medication. "Mom, the vase has been at my house since Dad's funeral. You gave it to me, remember?" I did not remember because it had never happened. One afternoon, I wheeled myself to the study earlier than expected and overheard Bradley and Amanda in heated conversation. "The real estate agent says we could list it for $2.5 million, Bradley whispered. "Even split 3 ways, that's life-changing money." "We need to move faster," Amanda replied. "She's recovering quicker than the doctor predicted." They fell silent when they noticed me in the doorway, their faces composing into false smiles so quickly it was chilling. My suspicions now fully aroused, I began paying closer attention. When Bradley returned some financial documents, I noticed discrepancies. The statements showed withdrawals I hadn't authorized, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. Nearly $30,000 had vanished in just 3 weeks. When I confronted Bradley, his response chilled me to the bone. "Mom, you're getting confused. These are legitimate expenses for your care and household maintenance. Maybe we should talk to your doctor about your memory issues." Amanda reinforced this gaslighting. "Mom's been forgetting a lot lately. Last week she accused the housekeeper of stealing a necklace, then found it in her bathroom drawer. This was a complete fabrication. No such incident had occurred. My children began speaking about me as if I weren't present, discussing my declining mental state in front of visitors. They scheduled a neurological examination without consulting me, telling the doctor they were concerned about dementia. The doctor found nothing wrong with my cognitive function, much to their visible disappointment. As my physical strength returned and I graduated from walker to cane, my children's tactics changed. They began restricting my visitors, screening my calls, and monitoring my conversations. "Mrs. Winters called for you," Amanda would say. "But I told her you were resting and couldn't be disturbed. She talks too much anyway, and you need your rest." My dear friend Margaret, who had planned to visit, told me later that Amanda had informed her I was too confused for visitors, and had canceled their lunch. I was becoming a prisoner in my own home. When I insisted on attending church, where I might speak freely with friends, Bradley claimed my usual driver was unavailable. When I suggested calling a taxi, Stephanie created a scene about safety concerns. The final confirmation of their betrayal came when I discovered they had been meeting with a lawyer specializing in conservatorship. A draft petition declaring me mentally incompetent had been left in Bradley's briefcase, which he'd carelessly left open in the study. That night, I confronted all 3 children during dinner. The masks of concern fell away, revealing the ugly truth beneath. "You're being ridiculous," Amanda snapped. "We're trying to protect you and the family assets." "From what?" I demanded. "I'm perfectly capable of managing my own life and money." "Are you?" Bradley's voice was cold. "You're almost 70, living alone in a house too big for you, making financial decisions that affect all of us." "Affect all of you?" I was incredulous. "This is my house, my money." "It's our inheritance," Stephanie said quietly, finally honest. "Everything you and Dad built was meant for us eventually. We're just making sure it's protected." In that moment, I realized these weren't the children I had raised. Somewhere along the way, they had become strangers with familiar faces, their hearts corrupted by greed. "I want you all to leave," I said, my voice trembling with anger rather than weakness. "Now." Bradley stood, towering over me. "That's not happening, Mom. We're doing this for your own good, whether you understand that or not." That was the night my phone disappeared from my bedside table. The next morning, the landline had been disconnected for upgrades. I was officially cut off from the outside world. What began as emotional manipulation soon escalated to something far more sinister. As I became more resistant to their control, my children's methods grew increasingly brutal. The first physical incident occurred when I attempted to leave the house unaccompanied. I had dressed carefully, using my cane for support, and was reaching for my coat when Bradley appeared in the hallway. "Where do you think you're going?" he demanded. "To have coffee with Margaret," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "She's picking me up in 10 minutes. "No, she's not. I already called and canceled." He moved toward me, his large frame blocking the doorway. "You're not leaving this house without one of us with you. It's not safe." "Get out of my way, Bradley," I said, attempting to step around him. What happened next remains surreal in my memory. My son, the boy I had taught to ride a bicycle, the teenager whose graduation speech had brought tears of pride to my eyes, placed his hands on my shoulders and shoved me backward. I lost my balance and fell hard, my hip screaming in agony as I hit the floor. "Now look what you've made me do," he said, his voice eerily calm. "This is exactly why you can't be alone. You're falling again." When Margaret called later to check why I hadn't shown up, Amanda answered and told her I had fallen and wasn't feeling well. Another lie to isolate me further. After that incident, a new lock appeared on the outside of my bedroom door. "For your safety," Amanda explained with a thin smile. "In case you get confused and wander at night." The first time they locked me in, I pounded on the door until my hands bruised. No one came. I spent that night alternating between tears of frustration and plotting my escape. By morning, I had realized that open defiance would only make my situation worse. I needed to appear compliant while seeking help secretly. During a family gathering the following weekend, I overheard Amanda instructing the guests not to engage me in complicated conversations, as it confuses her. My own sister looked at me with pity, believing I was suffering from dementia. When I tried to speak privately with her, Amanda never left my side, interpreting my words and speaking over me. "What Mom means is that she's been having vivid dreams that seem real to her," she explained after I attempted to tell my sister about my situation. The verbal abuse became routine. "You're becoming senile," Bradley would say when I questioned missing documents. "This is why we need to take control." "You were always selfish," Stephanie hissed after I refused to sign papers giving her access to my bank accounts. "All you care about is your money, not how much we need it." The worst incident, the one that nearly broke me, happened after I discovered and confronted them with the conservatorship papers. All 3 children cornered me in the study. "You've left us no choice," Amanda said, her voice hard. "You're clearly not capable of making rational decisions." "I won't sign those papers," I stated firmly. "This is elder abuse and it's illegal." Bradley laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Who are you going to tell? No one would believe you over the 3 of us." I turned to leave, leaning heavily on my cane. Stephanie stepped forward and wrenched it from my hand. "You need to listen to us, Mother," she said. "What followed haunts my nightmares still." Stephanie handed my cane to Bradley, who weighed it in his hands as if testing its sturdiness. Then, with a nod from Amanda, he swung it against my legs. The pain was excruciating. I crumpled to the floor, crying out in shock more than pain. "Sign the papers and this stops," Amanda said, her voice detached as if discussing the weather. When I again refused, Bradley struck me again, this time across my back. Then Amanda took a turn. Even Stephanie, after initial hesitation, snatched the cane and delivered a blow to my shoulder. By the time they finished, I was curled on the floor, my body throbbing with fresh bruises layered over surgical scars that had barely healed. They left me there for hours before Bradley returned, helped me to my bedroom, and locked the door. The next morning, Amanda brought breakfast and acted as if nothing had happened, chatting about the weather while I silently catalogued my injuries. A large bruise darkened my right thigh. My back and shoulders were tender to the touch. My left wrist had swollen where I tried to shield my face. "The lawyer is coming tomorrow," she said cheerfully as she collected my barely touched tray. "I'm sure once you've had time to think, you'll make the right decision." Locked in my room with only supervised bathroom breaks, I was given minimal food and water. I heard them in other parts of the house, cataloging my possessions as if I were already gone. Stephanie entered my room while they thought I was sleeping, and took my jewelry box containing pieces that had been in the family for generations. I lay in bed that night, my body aching, and made a decision. I would not die this way, imprisoned and abused by my own children. I would fight back with every resource at my disposal. They had underestimated me, forgotten that I was not just their mother, but a woman who had helped build a financial empire from nothing. I still had one secret they hadn't discovered: an emergency phone hidden in a waterproof container behind the bathroom toilet, installed years ago at Richard's insistence after a series of break-ins in the neighborhood. Now I just needed the strength to reach it and the opportunity to use it without being caught. As I drifted into an uneasy sleep, I thought not of the pain but of what would come next. They had beaten me with my cane, but I would beat them with something far more powerful: my wealth and the legal system they thought they could manipulate. The morning the lawyer was scheduled to arrive became the turning point in my nightmare. Amanda entered my room early, carrying a fresh outfit and a makeup kit. "We need you looking presentable," she said, laying out clothes I recognized as mine but hadn't chosen. "Mr. Donovan will be here at 11 to discuss the conservatorship." Her tone left no room for argument, but the bruises on my body told a story no amount of makeup could conceal. As she helped me dress, roughly pulling a sweater over my head, I winced at the pain in my shoulders. "Stop being so dramatic," she snapped. "It's not that bad." But it was. The mirror revealed what my children had done. A purplish-yellow bruise bloomed along my jawline where the cane had caught me when I'd turned my head. My wrist was swollen and discolored. Makeup might hide some marks, but nothing could conceal the evident pain in my movements. Amanda applied foundation heavily to my face, muttering about my difficult skin. This close, I could see no remorse in her eyes, no recognition of the monstrous betrayal. This woman who shared my blood and had once shared my heart was now a stranger. "Mr. Donovan understands your condition," she said as she worked. "He specializes in cases like yours, elderly people who can no longer manage their affairs." "I'm perfectly capable of managing my affairs," I said quietly. She ignored me, continuing her monologue about how they were doing this for my benefit, how the large house was too much for me, how they would ensure I received proper care in a facility better suited to my needs. When she left to check if the lawyer had arrived, I made my move. Using the moments alone, I hobbled to the bathroom without my cane, which they had confiscated. The pain was excruciating, but desperation gave me strength. Reaching behind the toilet required contortions that sent spasms through my injured back, but my fingers finally closed around the waterproof container. The emergency phone had minimal charge, having been there for months, but it powered on. With shaking fingers, I dialed Martha Goldstein, not just my lawyer but a friend of 30 years. The call connected just as I heard Amanda's footsteps returning. "Martha," I whispered frantically, "it's Eleanor. I'm being held prisoner in my own home. My children are abusing me. Please send help to." The bathroom door flew open. Amanda stood there, her face contorted with rage at the sight of the phone in my hand. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed, lunging forward. I backed away, but in the small bathroom, there was nowhere to go. She grabbed my wrist, squeezing the bruises there until I cried out in pain and dropped the phone. It clattered to the tile floor where Amanda stomped on it, shattering the screen. "You deceitful old witch," she spat. "After everything we've done for you." She dragged me from the bathroom with surprising strength, throwing me onto the bed. The door slammed behind her, and I heard the lock click, followed by heated conversation in the hallway. Minutes later, all 3 children burst into the room. Bradley's face was flushed with anger. Stephanie looked frightened, and Amanda was coldly furious. "Who did you call?" Bradley demanded. When I refused to answer, he grabbed my cane from where it leaned against the wall and held it threateningly. "Tell us or this gets worse." Looking into my son's eyes, I saw nothing of the boy I had raised. Whatever humanity had once existed there had been consumed by greed. In that moment, something within me hardened. These were not my children anymore. "Martha Goldstein," I said, my voice steady despite my fear. "My lawyer." Bradley swore viciously while Amanda paced the room. "How much did you tell her?" Stephanie asked, her voice trembling. "Everything." I lied, hoping to intimidate them. In truth, the call had been too brief, but they didn't need to know that. What followed was the worst beating yet. Bradley struck first, the cane whistling through the air before connecting with my ribs. I heard something crack and screamed in pain. "Shut her up," Amanda hissed, throwing a pillow at Stephanie. "The lawyer will be here any minute." Stephanie pressed the pillow against my face, not long enough to smother me but enough to muffle my cries as Bradley and Amanda took turns striking me with the cane. The irony wasn't lost on me even through the pain. The assistive device meant to support me had become an instrument of torture in my children's hands. When they finally stopped, I lay curled in a fetal position, barely conscious. Through swollen eyes, I watched them straighten their clothes and compose themselves. "Clean her up," Amanda instructed Stephanie. "Tell Donovan she's had another fall and isn't feeling well enough for visitors. We'll reschedule for next week." They left me with Stephanie, who wet a washcloth and mechanically wiped blood from my face, her eyes vacant. "Why are you doing this?" I whispered. "You were always my gentle one." Something flickered in her eyes, regret perhaps, but quickly disappeared. "I need the money, Mom. My business is failing, and I'm drowning in debt. This house alone would solve everything." As she tended my wounds with clinical detachment, I spotted Bradley's briefcase on the floor where he'd dropped it in his rage. Papers had spilled out, including what appeared to be bank statements. When Stephanie left to get bandages, I painfully dragged myself toward it and managed to conceal several documents under the mattress before she returned. That night, locked in my room and left with only a glass of water and some toast, I examined what I'd taken. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Bradley had already transferred over $200,000 from my accounts to his own. A draft deed showed plans to transfer my house to a limited liability company controlled by all 3 children. Most disturbing was a life insurance policy taken out on me without my knowledge, naming them as beneficiaries. The papers slipped from my trembling hands. My own children were not just abusing me. They were systematically stealing everything I owned and possibly planning something even worse. The realization brought clarity through the fog of pain. I had to escape, not just to save my assets but possibly to save my life. Using every ounce of determination, I dragged myself to the window. It was too high to escape from, especially in my condition. The bedroom door was solidly locked from the outside. The bathroom window was too small. I was truly trapped. Then I remembered. The house's original dumbwaiter, converted to a laundry chute years ago, connected to the laundry room in the basement. If I could fit through it and survive the descent, I might reach the seldom used rear basement door. Pain shot through my body as I forced myself across the room to the closet where the old chute was located. The small door was stiff, unused for years, but eventually yielded to my desperate efforts. The opening was narrow, too narrow for a healthy adult, but perhaps just wide enough for my injured, underweight body. I listened carefully to ensure the house was quiet. It was past midnight, and no sounds came from the other bedrooms. This would be my only chance. Saying a silent prayer, I maneuvered my body into the opening feet first, using my arms to lower myself as gently as possible into the dark shaft. The descent was agonizing. Twice I nearly fell, catching myself just in time. Every movement sent waves of pain through my battered body. When I finally reached the bottom, collapsing onto the laundry room floor, I lay there gasping, fighting to remain conscious. The basement door was locked, but the key still hung on its hook nearby. My children had overlooked this potential escape route. With the last of my strength, I unlocked it and stumbled out into the cool night air. Freedom at last within my grasp. A neighbor's house glowed with lights despite the late hour. Helen Davis, a retired nurse who had always been kind to me, lived there. Barely able to walk, I crawled across the lawn toward her home, praying she would see me before my strength gave out completely. The last thing I remember is Helen's shocked face as she opened her door and found me collapsed on her doorstep, her cry for help as darkness finally claimed me. I awoke in a hospital bed, the steady beep of monitors confirming I was alive. Every inch of my body throbbed with pain, but a warm hand clasped mine. Not my children's hands, those had brought only pain recently, but the soft, wrinkled hand of Martha Goldstein, my lawyer and friend of 3 decades. "Eleanor," she whispered, leaning forward when she saw my eyes open. "Thank God. You've been unconscious for 2 days. 2 days." I tried to speak, but my throat was parched. Martha offered water through a straw, her eyes never leaving my face. "Your neighbor called an ambulance," she explained. "You have 3 broken ribs, a fractured wrist, internal bruising, and a concussion. The doctors also found evidence of malnutrition and dehydration." Her voice broke. "Who did this to you?" "My children," I whispered, the words like broken glass in my throat. Martha's expression hardened from concern to cold fury. "I suspected as much when you called. The police are waiting to take your statement when you're ready." The police. Reality crashed back. My children, the abuse, the theft, the escape. Fear gripped me. "They'll come for me." "No, they won't," Martha assured me firmly. "There's a police officer outside your door. Your children have been barred from the hospital." Over the next few hours, as my strength gradually returned, I gave my statement to a compassionate detective named Sarah Reeves. I detailed the escalating abuse, the financial theft, the imprisonment, and the beatings. Detective Reeves photographed my injuries, her face grim as she documented each bruise and laceration. "Mrs. Winters, I've been handling elder abuse cases for 15 years, she said when we finished. "This is one of the worst cases I've seen. We'll be pursuing criminal charges against all 3 of your children." When she left, Martha stayed, her legal pad filled with notes. "Now," she said with determination, "let's discuss how we fight back." Martha had already begun investigating my finances based on my frantic phone call. What she discovered was even worse than I'd feared. Bradley had systematically looted nearly $200,000 from my accounts. Amanda had been contacting my investment managers, attempting to liquidate holdings by forging my signature. Stephanie had been selling my jewelry and antiques through a dealer friend, pocketing the proceeds. "The good news," Martha said, "is that we can recover most of it. The bad news is that your children have spent some of the money already." Bradley made a down payment on a vacation home. Amanda paid off her mortgage. Stephanie cleared some credit card debt. My heart ached at this confirmation of their betrayal, but I pushed the pain aside. Now was the time for action, not grief. "What do we do?" I asked. Martha outlined a comprehensive strategy. First, immediate legal action to freeze all my accounts and prevent further theft. Second, a restraining order against all 3 children to protect me upon hospital release. Third, criminal charges for elder abuse, fraud, and theft. Fourth, civil lawsuits to recover the stolen assets plus punitive damages. "And finally," she said, her eyes gleaming, "we rewrite your estate plan completely." For the next week, as my body slowly healed, my mind focused sharply on reclaiming my life and my dignity. Martha brought paralegals and financial forensic experts to my hospital room. We tracked every missing penny, documented every unauthorized transaction, built an airtight case against my children. Security measures were implemented for my eventual return home. New locks, a sophisticated alarm system, cameras at all entrances. Martha hired a security consultant who had once worked for a private protection firm. "Your children underestimated you," he said after reviewing our plans. "They won't make that mistake again, but we'll be ready." The most satisfying part of our planning came when Martha brought my new estate documents for signature. The revised will removed my children completely, directing my entire estate to a newly established charitable foundation supporting elder abuse victims. The irony was perfect. The money my children had tried to steal would now help others escape situations like mine. "Are you certain about this?" Martha asked as I prepared to sign. "This is your entire estate." I didn't hesitate. They forfeited their inheritance when they raised a hand against me. 2 weeks after my admission, doctors cleared me for discharge. I was still weak, still healing, but determined to reclaim my home. Martha arranged for a private ambulance, nursing care, and security personnel to accompany me. As we pulled into my driveway, I saw all 3 of my children standing on the porch, clearly not expecting my return. Amanda stepped forward, her face a mask of false concern that dropped when she saw the police cars following us. "Mother," she called out, her voice sickly sweet. "We've been so worried. The hospital wouldn't tell us anything." I didn't respond as security staff helped me from the vehicle. Detective Reeves approached my children, official papers in hand. "Amanda, Bradley, and Stephanie Winters," she announced formally. "I'm serving you with emergency restraining orders prohibiting contact with Eleanor Winters. You are to remove yourselves from this property immediately and remain at least 500 feet away at all times." Bradley's face contorted with rage. "This is ridiculous. She's our mother. She's confused and making things up. The extensive documentation of her injuries suggests otherwise," Detective Reeves replied coldly. "As do the financial records we've subpoenaed." Their expressions changed from indignation to panic as they realized the extent of what was happening. As security personnel escorted me past them into my home, I finally spoke. "I gave you everything a mother could give," I said, my voice steady despite my physical weakness. "Love, opportunities, financial support. In return, you tried to take everything from me, including my dignity. You won't get a second chance." Stephanie burst into tears, whether from genuine remorse or self-pity, I couldn't tell. Amanda remained stonily silent. Bradley attempted one last manipulation. "Mom, you can't do this to us. We're your family. Your only family." Martha stepped forward. "Mrs. Winters has all the family she needs. Now leave before we have you arrested for violating the restraining order." Watching them walk away from my home, not theirs, never theirs, I felt a complex mixture of grief and determination. The children I had loved were gone, replaced by strangers wearing their faces. But I was still here, still fighting, and they would soon learn just how formidable an opponent I could be. The legal proceedings against my children began with breathtaking swiftness. Martha had prepared meticulously, and within days of my return home, the machinery of justice was in full motion. Criminal charges came first. Detective Reeves presented the district attorney with overwhelming evidence. Photographs of my injuries, medical reports documenting the physical abuse, financial records showing systematic theft, and my detailed testimony. All 3 children were arrested and charged with elder abuse, false imprisonment, assault with a deadly weapon, grand theft, and conspiracy. Their mugshots appeared in the local newspaper. Amanda, her carefully maintained image now shattered, looked shell-shocked. Bradley's arrogance had dissolved into fear. Stephanie appeared completely broken, mascara streaking her face from endless tears. They hired expensive attorneys who immediately attempted to paint me as mentally incompetent, claiming they had acted only out of concern for my well-being. This strategy backfired spectacularly when Martha produced recent neurological evaluations confirming my mental acuity, along with video recordings of my detailed testimony that demonstrated my clear cognition. The criminal case proceeded in parallel with our civil actions. We filed lawsuits against each child individually for the recovery of stolen funds, compensation for physical and emotional distress, and punitive damages. We also filed actions to void any financial transactions they had conducted using my assets. During discovery, the full extent of their betrayal became clear. Email exchanges between them revealed they had been planning this for over a year, since shortly after Richard's death. They had researched legal mechanisms to gain control of my estate, discussed which of my possessions each wanted, and even strategized how to isolate me from friends who might intervene. Most chilling were Bradley's messages suggesting they needed to accelerate the timeline because I was too healthy and might live another 20 years. The implication was clear and horrifying. When confronted with this evidence during depositions, their defenses crumbled. Amanda broke down, admitting they had planned to have me declared incompetent. Bradley attempted to blame his siblings before finally acknowledging his leadership role in the scheme. Stephanie, who had been the least involved in the planning but had participated in the abuse, provided detailed testimony against her siblings in exchange for a plea deal. The financial investigation revealed even more than we had initially discovered. Bradley had embezzled nearly twice what we'd originally estimated, using complex transfers to hide the theft. Amanda had liquidated investment accounts and pocketed the proceeds. Together, they had stolen nearly $500,000 over the preceding year. More disturbing were their personal financial situations. Despite appearances of success, all three were deeply in debt. Bradley had made risky investments that failed spectacularly. Amanda's lavish lifestyle far exceeded her income. Stephanie's fashion business had never been profitable and was now failing completely. They had planned to use my money to solve their financial problems, counting on my death or incapacitation to avoid consequences. Now they face financial ruin. The criminal trial was mercifully brief. The evidence was overwhelming, and the prosecutor was relentless. I testified for 3 days, describing in excruciating detail the abuse I had suffered at my children's hands. Throughout my testimony, I never wavered, never broke down, though inside I was shattered anew by having to recount these horrors. When asked why my children had done this, I spoke the painful truth. They valued my money more than they valued me. They saw me not as their mother but as an obstacle between them and wealth they hadn't earned. The jury deliberated for less than 5 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, delivered sentences that reflected the gravity of their crimes. Bradley received 15 years for his leadership role in the conspiracy. Amanda received 12 years. Stephanie, due to her cooperation and seemingly genuine remorse, received 5 years with eligibility for parole after 3. As they were led away in handcuffs, none of them looked at me. I felt no satisfaction, only a hollow sense that justice, while necessary, could never truly heal what had been broken. The civil judgments came next. The court ordered full restitution of all stolen funds, plus damages exceeding $2 million. To satisfy these judgments, their assets were seized and sold. Bradley's new vacation home, Amanda's mortgage-free residence, Stephanie's struggling business, their vehicles, investment accounts, everything. When this proved insufficient to cover the judgments, wage garnishment orders were issued, ensuring that for decades after their release from prison, a significant portion of any money they earned would go toward paying their debt to me. News of the case spread through the community and beyond. A national news magazine covered the story, interviewing me about the epidemic of elder abuse in America. I spoke candidly about my experience, hoping to help others recognize warning signs I had missed. What touched me most during this difficult period were the responses from strangers. Letters poured in from elderly people sharing similar experiences, thanking me for standing up and fighting back. Adult children wrote expressing horror at my children's actions and reassessing how they treated their own aging parents. Local organizations against elder abuse invited me to speak at their events. Initially reluctant, I eventually agreed, finding unexpected healing and transforming my pain into advocacy. My foundation, newly established with the money that would have been my children's inheritance, began funding emergency shelters specifically for elderly victims of abuse. Throughout this period, I rebuilt my support network. Helen, the neighbor who had saved my life, became a close friend. My sister, now understanding the truth, became my fierce defender. Martha, my attorney but also my friend, spent countless hours ensuring not just my legal protection but my emotional well-being. New security systems and staff ensured my physical safety. A financial team helped restructure my assets to prevent any future attempts at theft. Slowly, my home became my sanctuary again, rather than the site of betrayal and abuse. 6 months after the criminal sentencing, I received 3 letters from prison. My children, writing separately, offered apologies of varying sincerity. Bradley's was calculating, focusing on how we might move forward as a family. Amanda's was defensive, acknowledging wrongdoing but blaming financial desperation. Only Stephanie seemed genuinely remorseful, filled with self-recrimination and regret. I read each letter carefully, then placed them in a folder labeled Closed Chapter. The mother who would have forgiven anything was gone, replaced by a woman who understood that some betrayals cannot and should not be forgiven. The sweet revenge wasn't the legal victories or financial judgments, satisfying as those were. The true triumph was reclaiming myself, my autonomy, my dignity, my future. My children had tried to write the end of my story. Instead, I had written the end of theirs and the beginning of a new chapter for myself. Recovery is neither quick nor linear. In the year following the trial, I experienced both progress and setbacks in my journey toward healing. Physical wounds mended more easily than emotional ones. The broken ribs knitted together, the bruises faded, the fractured wrist regained most of its mobility with physical therapy. But nightmares plagued my sleep, and unexpected sounds could trigger panic attacks that left me trembling and disoriented. I worked with a therapist specializing in trauma and elder abuse, slowly processing the complex grief of losing my children not to death, but to their own moral failures. Dr. Lieberman helped me understand that mourning was appropriate, not for the children who had abused me, but for the children I thought I had, the ones who had existed in my heart and memory before their betrayal. "You're mourning an illusion," she explained gently. "The loving children you remember raising, in some fundamental way, they never truly existed as you perceived them." This was perhaps the most painful realization, that I had never really known my children at all. Had they always harbored this capacity for cruelty? Had I missed signs throughout their lives? Or had something changed them along the way? These questions haunted me, though I gradually accepted that I might never have answers. My healing journey took an unexpected turn when the Eleanor Winters Foundation for Elder Protection began its work in earnest. What had started as a simple redirection of my estate became a mission that gave new purpose to my life. We funded research into elder abuse prevention, supported shelters, and provided legal assistance to seniors who couldn't afford representation. Martha suggested we create a speaker series, bringing in experts and survivors to educate the public. Initially, I attended only as a sponsor, still uncomfortable with public discussion of my trauma. But when a scheduled speaker canceled at the last minute, I reluctantly agreed to fill in. Standing at the podium that evening, facing an audience of social workers, medical professionals, and concerned citizens, I felt exposed and vulnerable. My prepared remarks seemed inadequate, sterile. Instead, I set aside my notes and spoke from the heart about betrayal, resilience, and reclaiming dignity. Elder abuse thrives in silence, I told them. The shame we feel, yes, shame though we are the victims, keeps us quiet. Our abusers count on that silence. They count on our love for them, on our reluctance to expose family secrets, on our fear of not being believed. The room was absolutely silent as I continued. I am Eleanor Winters. I raised 3 children who beat me with my own cane and tried to steal everything I owned. I am not ashamed to tell you this, though it breaks my heart. Their shame is not my shame. Their choices are not my failure. The standing ovation that followed was overwhelming. More significant were the people who approached afterward, elderly men and women whispering their own stories, many for the first time. I realized then that my voice could be a powerful tool, not just for my healing but for others. As the foundation grew, so did my involvement in advocacy work. I testified before state legislators considering strengthened elder abuse laws. I consulted with law enforcement agencies developing specialized elder abuse units. Most meaningfully, I mentored other survivors, showing by example that there was life and purpose after betrayal. 8 months after the trial, I sold the family home. Despite new security systems and staff, the house remained filled with painful memories. Each room held echoes of both happy times and recent trauma. Martha helped me find a beautiful single-level home, in a secure community with a garden that captured morning light. The move was physically taxing but emotionally liberating. Meanwhile, my children's lives continued their downward trajectory. Amanda's marketing career was destroyed by her conviction. No company would hire an executive convicted of elder abuse and fraud. Bradley, once the golden boy of finance, was disbarred from the securities industry for life. Stephanie's fashion business had been liquidated to pay damages. Their professional identities, like their freedom, were casualties of their own choices. I learned through Martha that Amanda's husband had filed for divorce, unable to withstand the public scandal and financial ruin. Bradley's wife initially stood by him but separated after discovering he had hidden financial problems from her as well. Stephanie, always the most emotionally vulnerable, suffered a breakdown in prison and was transferred to the psychiatric unit. Their children, my grandchildren, were the innocent victims in this tragedy. The oldest was 17, the youngest just 8. I had established educational trusts for each of them, structured so their parents could never access the funds. Whether they would want a relationship with me someday remained an open question. I had left that door unlocked, if not quite open. 2 years after my escape, I received simultaneous letters from Bradley and Amanda. Prison had not humbled them. Instead, their words revealed continued entitlement and manipulation. Both suggested that enough time had passed for me to reconsider my harsh stance. Both hinted that their continued hardship was somehow my responsibility to alleviate. Stephanie's letter, which arrived a week later, was different. She wrote not to ask for anything but to offer a genuine apology that acknowledged the inexcusable nature of their actions. "I don't expect forgiveness," she wrote. "I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that I understand now what we did to you, and I will live with that shame forever." I responded only to Stephanie, not with forgiveness exactly, but with acknowledgement of her apparent growth and a small opening, the possibility of supervised communication through our respective therapists. It was a tiny step, and I had no illusion about ever fully trusting her again, but it was the only concession to our former bond one was willing to make. As my 70th birthday approached, Martha insisted on a celebration. "Not just of another year," she said, "but of your triumph." The party gathered all the people who had become my chosen family: Helen from next door, my sister and her family, Martha and her husband, Detective Reeves, now a friend, my medical team, foundation colleagues, and survivors I had mentored. Standing in the garden of my new home, surrounded by people who genuinely cared for my well-being, I felt something I had feared might be lost forever: joy. Not happiness built on illusion, but joy grounded in truth and authentic connection. Later that evening, Martha raised a toast to Eleanor, who taught us all that courage doesn't mean fearlessness, but facing fear and acting anyway, who showed us that age brings not weakness but wisdom and strength. As glasses clinked, I reflected on the journey from victim to survivor to advocate. My children had beaten me with my cane, but I had beaten them with my resilience, my resources, and ultimately my refusal to be silenced or diminished. The wealth they had coveted now served a purpose they never intended: helping others escape situations like mine. There is no perfect ending to a story like this. The mother in me still grieves for what might have been. But the woman in me, the whole person beyond the maternal role, has found peace in building a life that honors truth rather than comfortable illusions. If you're watching this and struggling with abuse from those who should love you most, please hear me. You are not alone. Your voice matters. Your life matters. Reach out for help, as I finally did. And if you know someone who may be suffering in silence, be their Martha or their Helen, the person who believes them, who helps them find safety and justice. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? Have you witnessed elder abuse in your family or community? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might be the lifeline someone else needs. Remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories of survival and transformation. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, it's never too late to reclaim your power and your dignity.